So I know for a fact that there's no other anime content creator on this app that has bothered to go through the amount of effort that I have in order to get content regarding Naruto. Neither do they have the capacity to even read Japanese. So I have all the novels, both in ebooks or I have physical copies. Now, this particular novel, the reason why I keep flexing this novel, you cannot get an ebook of this. So unless if you ordered it from Japan, so if you knew how to buy books in Japanese in Japan, get it sent to you, and then get the Japanese copy of this book, see, this is the Japanese, then you would literally be missing an entire book worth of knowledge scaling Naruto characters AP and DC. And this actually talks about pretty much all the top tiers of Naruto characters AP and DC very clearly. And it explains exactly what their AP is. Because the fan translations using Dr. Google, imagine trying to diagnose yourself using Google. You aren't going to get the best results. But if you have people that actually speak the language of medicine, or in this case, Japanese, then they can help you to understand correctly what is actually stated. So there's plenty of panels that come from this novel that people couldn't debate about. Why? Because they never had the original text. And now I'm going to be showing you some of the scans that people have been sending around, which are fakes, by the way, or fan translations, and debunking them or discussing them or speaking the truth about them. For example, one of the scans that's really popular that's in this book, in a fan translation, says Momoshiki created a parallel universe, or the parallel universe that he made. Now, if you just look 5 seconds into the actual raw Japanese sentence that was displayed in the book, it doesn't say anything like that. But we'll go through that later in this video. Alright, so let's talk about Kaguya Osutsuki. So first of all, in the most important panel with her, it says in a fan translation of the data books that she created dimensions as she pleases in the Ame no Minaka panel. However, when we look away from the title and we actually read the ability itself, it says it's a technique that Kaguya, who owns the Rin Sharingan, uses in an instant. She can move the world she's in together with other people to a different dimension. The places she can move to are the dimensions of lava, ice, supergravity, sand, and acid. And these 5 dimensions are directly connected by the first. So it's a technique that teleports objects or people to and from her dimensions. In other words, she's not actually creating dimensions with this ability. She's merely teleporting people to and from her dimensions. So why was it translated in the title to say creating dimensions? Well, when we actually look at the Japanese, this is what it says. Kukan or sumugu. And this is the kanji they use for space or dimension, kukan. And this roughly translates to assembling space. So in the kind of context that this word assemble is being used, it can also mean spin or thread, kind of like you're taking a needle and you're going to make something out of the thread that you're going to use. So you're already using pre-existing materials to assemble or create something. So if this is the case, she's not actually creating these dimensions. She's already using what's in existence. So this is not creation, and it's not destruction either. This is merely using something that's already there. You have to be able to rearrange where those objects are. So that's effectively what her ability, the Ame no Minaka, is. It's a teleportation ability. You see a portal open, people go through, they come out the other end. That's pretty much what the Ame no Minaka is. It is not a dimension creating ability. So if that's the case, does Kaguya actually create her dimensions? Now that's the real question, because she's never been proven to do so within the actual anime, nor has she been proven to do so within the manga. Nor has anyone in the entire Naruto verse ever proven to create an entire dimension or a universe. It's never been stated, and it's never been shown. When Kaguya used the Truthseeking Orb, and it stated that it would be the start of a new time space, But even this in itself is not sufficient enough to prove a dimension creation, because the start of a new time space doesn't necessarily mean that you're creating a time space. It's just the start. So here's a really popular fan translation of the expansive Truth-Seeking Orb panel. And one of the most notable differences that you'll see is where the red highlights sit. It says in the first line that it encloses the power of all creation. Now, that is not what it says at all. But obviously, whoever translated this clearly wanted to make it look a lot more powerful than it really is. See, in my version of the translation, it actually translated to the power of all chakra types, but that's very different to the power of all creation. Even the official Viz translation of the manga actually double confirms my translation, because it says this in this panel, in the top left panel specifically: an expansive Kekkei Mortar Truth Seeker Orb that contains each and every nature: wind, fire, earth, lightning, shadow, and light. So it doesn't say the power of all creation. It's actually talking about every nature or every chakra type. The databooks explain that the expansive truth-seeking orb uses the power of all chakra types sealed inside it, and that it's a large black ball of chaos that destroys a world and creates it again. Now, it's not destroying the world and creating as you think it might be. It's actually just resetting the cycle. Because in the law of karma, where things are created and destroyed, or the Buddhism evolution zeshi, because they didn't use the word creation and they didn't use the word destroy either. They used zeshi, which is a Buddhist reference. This means that all this truth-seeking orb is doing is allowing the world that the orb is being used on to reset from the beginning. And it's not actually creating anything, it's just allowing the natural cycles to restart a world. For example, the ninja world is what it was being used on. So the orb here, as stated, in the top right, was going to affect the place that Kaguya can directly get Shinobi Chakra from. And the only place that she can get Shinobi Chakra from is the ninja world. In other words, the ninja world was going to be the start of a new time space. So we know that roughly Kaguya was going to affect a planet or a world in size. And this is backed up by many, many other statements from other characters that I'll go over now. The dimensions people were being sent to and from were only worlds in size. Sakura comments saying that this is a world of lava, and as they go through different worlds, even Kinshiki comments that he calls Kaguya's dimensions Kaguya's worlds. Even Kakashi supported that it's only a world, because when he arrived in the world of lava, where Sakura says, the world of lava, Kakashi actually calls this a dimension using the same kanji, which is kukan, right? That's the same as the kanji that was used back on the Ame no Minaka panel here, where it says kukan no sumugu, in other words, dimension assemble. In Boruto Novel 3, we learn that there is a place called the Unidentified World, or Shirenu Sekai, and this was a region of space that was destroyed by Momoshiki. And this was caused by him using the chakra fruit, or constantly harvesting chakra fruit from one of the god trees, which eventually destroyed the unidentified world. And this is the text that they translated it from. Now, the important Japanese that I do wish to go over, and the reason why this panel is relevant, is people like to talk about the Redshift Nebula, or the red stars in the background. That means it's an infinitely expanding universe, and Momoshiki created an infinitely expanded universe, right? That makes it multiversal or something along those lines. Or another crazy argument that I heard was that there was a dying sun, and this sun dying would cause a supernova, which was never stated, by the way. But we're going to get into that and explain each point. So did Momoshiki cause a supernova? Well, here we learn in this text that it's stated that the synchrotron radiation of the dying sun that burns red illuminates the reddish surface like a colorful aurora. So I'm going to hyper-focus on the key word here, dying sun. So there was nothing else stated other than there is a red dying sun. So there wasn't mention of a supernova being caused or going to be caused as a consequence of this dying sun, because people claim that the sun was dying, it was going to cause a supernova, wiping out the entire universe. That's what makes Momoshiki universal. Even if the sun was dying, people also claim that Momoshiki was responsible for destroying this sun. But based off this exact statement and the statements from the books, it was never stated that Momoshiki himself was responsible for that sun dying. So this is not an argument. Like in the book, nowhere does it say that he actually caused the death of that sun. So therefore, he did not cause the supernova or the death of the star. So you may have heard of the northern lights and how they're green, but in this case, because of that dying sun in the background, this is why the stars in the sky appear to be red. It's not because it's a redshift nebula. It was never stated to be a redshift nebula. It is stated that the red synchrotron radiation, so the radiation from the sun, is what makes it red. So this is why Momoshiki did not cause. Alright, so finally, let's talk about the Boruto Naruto the movie text. Now, in this book, this is where you'll find the really infamous line where people claim that Momoshiki built a parallel world or parallel universe. But this is what it really says. On page 212, it says, Chakra is leaking out of the parallel world he built. Compare this to the fake scan, or in other words, the fan translation. It says, he was even draining the chakra that was beyond the parallel dimension he'd made, which is quite different to the raw text. And you can see the raw text here in this panel. I'll display it right now. Just on this side, I blanked out the irrelevant part, but you can translate the kanjis yourself if you want to see what it actually says. In conclusion, the text basically states that any of their dimensions are worlds, so they're planetary at most. And even if they did create these so-called dimensions, when we know that there isn't any proven abilities that have actually established that any of the Asutsuki or anyone in all of Naruto has actually created a planet or more. Because we went over the Ame no Minaka panel, which was like the only thing talking about creating dimensions. And even in that one, doesn't explain. Like just in the title itself, it says Kaguya creates dimensions as she pleases. But that would be an example of a name fallacy, because you're looking at the title expecting that the ability will match up with the title. But the actual panel, when you read it out, doesn't say what's in the title. It just talks about teleportation and moving objects. It doesn't talk about creating dimensions. So they don't actually have any abilities that have been proven to create anything, at least in the show. Based off statements, you could argue that the expansive truth-seeking orb had the capacity to reset the natural cycles of a world, but again, you're only going to be constructing or creating a world at the most. So, based off the evidence that we've seen, you've got Sakura calling them worlds, Kaguya calling them worlds, Kinshiki calling them worlds. You've got Kakashi referring to the same dimensions that Sakura referred to as worlds. Basically, it seems that the author is clearly trying to explain that these dimensions are just other worlds. Therefore, it would be most accurate to claim that the Asutsuki, Naruto, and Sasuke are around planetary. And the reason for that is because they were stated that the purpose, the one goal of the Asutsuki was to go from planet to planet, devouring these planets. So, based on the fact that they need help to planet devour, like they actually have to use trees to absorb the planets and then eat the chakra fruits because they can't do it on their own. Even that would be a stretch. So based on all of the information that has been presented, it is most likely canon to assume that the top tier Naruto characters are around planetary and no more. Any of the star statements I've already gone over in the Ultimate Debunk or in this video. And when we are using the word star in Japanese, it often means planet, because in Japanese, star can mean anything in the sky. It can mean comets, moons, um, things that you can see in the sky that would appear as a star from an observer. So it doesn't necessarily mean a sun when they say star. So Versus Battle Wiki even wrote an article explaining that when they use the kanji hoshi to describe a star, it doesn't inherently mean sun or star. Therefore, as a mid-ball, it's safer to say that they're talking about planets, because even in the Boruto novels, it talked about the star that Momoshiki had drained, but there was people living on it. So how could they live on a star? Well, the answer is, in Japanese, star doesn't mean sun. It means, basically any celestial body, which includes planets. Therefore, again, based on all the different evidence that has been presented, Naruto characters should be around planetary at the most.